Welcome to the Biz Communication Show. I'm your host, Bill Lampton. Every week, bringing in for discussion a recognized business professional expert who has excelled in communication. And if we listen to their advice and if we apply it, we will definitely boost our productivity and, yes, our profits as well. Today, I'm very pleased to bring to us Stacey Reece, the president and the owner of Spherion in Gainesville, Georgia. Spherion, for more than 70 years, has experience connecting job seekers to employers. Stacey, as I say, has been with Spherion in Gainesville for 21 years. And our topic is going to be how employers can become more successful and more skilled as interviewers. So, Stacey, welcome to the Biz Communication Show.
Bill, thank you for having me. Look forward to this interview and how we can help people out there be better interviewers.
Yes, and you know, this is a different tack than practically everything I've read or heard about the interview situation, because so much of the time we're focusing on the candidate, how they should dress, show up on time, questions they should ask and not ask, what to do as a follow-up. Why is it maybe we have neglected this all-important topic, which you're going to help us understand?
Yeah.
Why is it we have neglected, I suppose, helping the interviewer?
Well, I think for so many years, the interviewer has been in the driver's seat. They controlled the time of the interview, the length of the interview, what would be covered in the interview. And they mostly had this long list of questions that they expected the candidate to answer. Now you have candidates that are not only looking at other options, but they actually have recruiters reaching out to them as they're going to these interviews. So they're sitting in front of an interviewer knowing that if this one doesn't work out, they've got 3 more that they can line up immediately and go directly to. So it's imperative that the interviewer creates an atmosphere and sets a stage that woos that candidate, whether at that point they may not know whether or not they actually want to hire that individual, but they need to be sending positive signals, the right verbal messages, nonverbal messages out to the candidate during these interviews so that the candidate will stay connected and want to learn more and see it as an opportunity.
It's almost as though we have somebody different in the driver's seat.
That's very true. And as hard as it is for employers of all sizes, whether it's an employer of 10 people or an employer of 800 people, they're having a difficult time accepting the fact that they're not in the driver's seat. And, you know, these interviewers can be in their mid to late 20s or even in their 50s and 60s. It's not one age group that's having a difficult time with it. It's across the board. Bill, it's almost like it's, okay, I'm the hire. I'm the one that's going to make this decision. I'm the hiring manager, and I should be able to make these decisions. I shouldn't have to allow a candidate to dictate how the interview is going to go. So we actually try to work with our clients and say, okay, how do you interview? Tell me about your processes. And if you don't mind, we would like to give you some constructive feedback that will help you be even more effective in your interview process. So we try to set the stage before we even match the candidate to our client.
Excellent. Well, you know, there's a trend that I've been reading about recently and online and business publications, which is called ghosting. And part of that ghosting is where, for example, you would interview me, but I didn't like your interview style. I felt we couldn't work together. You offer me the job at a pretty good compensation level, and yet I just don't show up and I don't respond because, getting back to what you said a couple of minutes ago, it could be the applicant's market now instead of the employer's market. And so I just go someplace else and decide that's not going to hurt my reputation or my future, and I take another job with an employer who knew how to interview. You talked a minute ago, Stacey, about the right setting. Let's explore that for a minute. Uh, what do you advise interviewers about the setting itself? Because that can be very critical in the impression it makes on the candidate. Tell us about the possible ideal room, the ideal setting that makes the candidate feel welcomed, appreciated, and even comfortable.
Okay. In the old days, we would go into an interview and the interviewer, the hiring manager, would be sitting behind their desk with their big chair, and they would be that barrier of paperwork between them and the candidate maybe sitting in a much smaller chair. Today, we really encourage, and we practice this at Spherion when we're interviewing, and keep in mind, we're the first interview. If you're hiring me to recruit on your behalf, that first interview with the candidate is with my recruiter, not our client. So when we bring them in, we often sit around a round table. That way there's no hierarchy. We try to make it a very relaxed environment. We offer water, just something that they could have like that. And we attempt to create a conversation that then leads into all of the detailed questions that we would like to have answered. The one thing we like to tell our folks that we're interviewing is, as we go through the interview, we want to make sure all of your questions are answered. We want to make sure you leave this interview with all of the material and data you need to make an informed choice, as well as we get our questions answered. So we create that. It's an equal setting. It's you're going to get your questions answered. It's not just about my questions. And we always say, ask us some tough questions about who we are and what we do. We want to make sure you're comfortable that we can do the job for you as well.
It reminds me so much of what you're talking about, the big desk and the high elevated platform chair. I remember reading that J. Edgar Hoover, longtime director of the FBI under several presidents of the United States, J. Edgar Hoover was diminutive in stature. And so to intimidate people who came into his office, I've heard that he had his desk elevated several feet above someone else. And as you say, they might be sitting some distance from him and quite below him as well. One of the changes that you're indicating, which I certainly welcome, is that in previous decades, many employers who were conducting interviews almost wanted, or maybe not just almost wanted to set a tone of intimidation.
Yes.
I'm the boss. I'm the one who will be directing your every move here. And these probably were excellent micromanagers, if there is such a thing as an excellent micromanager. I remember so well during my previous profession when I was interviewing on several different occasions. Stacey, there was one time I went to an interview that was to last, I believe it was 2.5 days. I was going to be interviewed by the top guy in the organization and then a series of his lieutenants. And the first thing that happened when I got to the airport, this person wasn't there to meet me. And I waited and waited and waited. And about 15 minutes later, he walked up and he said, "Oh, I was on a phone call." So that was the first part of intimidation. We get to his office and he sits down and again has me at some distance. He says, "I've got some paperwork I need to do first." So he put his head down and did some paperwork for maybe 5 minutes or so. I didn't have the funds at that time to just go hop on a return flight. I had to wait and go through all the processes. But today, I suppose I would probably just walk out of there because today's candidates don't want that kind of climate. And the very first few minutes of an interview, the very first few seconds, we say that about speaking. It's certainly true with an interview as well. It sets a tone, doesn't it?
It does. It does. And the big thing is, believe it or not, we always talk about the millennials and the younger age groups that will be constantly on their electronics, their iPads, their laptops, their iPhones. Believe it or not, I've observed clients when you introduce them to a candidate, because sometimes we actually go to the interview with the candidate to make the introduction, to do the change off, and then we exit after our part's finished. But I've seen hiring managers sit there and check their email on their iPhone while the candidate is answering their questions. And I'm like, I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed that I've brought this candidate and put them in front of my client that's not giving them the appropriate time for a salaried managerial type position.
Or haven't you even seen them answer a telephone?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And again, this is a sign of who's in charge. This is a sign that this is my show. Mm-hmm. But what you're training managers to do is to have more or less an open, congenial forum, sharing of ideas, discussion about the opportunities with the company, getting to know the candidate. Now, getting to know the candidate brings me to something I feel we need to talk about, and that is, of course, for the last couple of decades, managers have been, by law, restricted from asking certain personal questions. I would imagine that there's some managers who try to go about that indirectly. Instead of asking the question, maybe a manager could talk about his children and say, tell me about yours, or something like that. What are you advising managers about the very sensitive questions which are illegal?
Yes, yeah. And I guess, we can all be guilty of that, Bill, from time to time. For example, my office is 10 employees, and, we work very close together. We work in very close environments together. So that mix of the team is extremely important. And sometimes if I can pick up kind of how a person functions outside of the normal job role, I would know whether or not they're going to be a better fit for this team that I lead. So you're right. There are questions that are illegal, and we actually have training that we can provide to hiring managers that help them understand questions they cannot ask and why they're illegal to ask. The more experienced interviewer will do what I call the leading questions, and maybe not as blunt as you just said, because if I were to say, oh, I have 2 children, they're both adults, how about you? That's not a leading question. That's an illegal question, because I'm specifically saying, how many children do you have? What I would probably do is to say that, Bill, what do you enjoy outside of the work environment? What do you like to do outside of the office? Well, you might say play golf, but other people might say, oh, I love spending time with my children, going to their soccer meets, and I've got 1 in gymnastics and 2 at play football. And you're thinking, oh, they're going to need a lot of time off, but they're definitely not going to be able to stay past 5 o'clock any day of the week because they have all these activities. The old days of being able to directly look at someone, even in a small hiring environment, we advise those people not to ask the illegal questions. Even if you're a small office of 3 people, you can find yourself in a world of hurt, and I do mean financial world of hurt, if you ask someone inappropriate questions and then they don't get the job and they file some kind of EEOC suit for wrongful hiring, wrongful interviewing questions. Anything with the EEOC begins with wrongful. So you really need to stay to the facts. And if people offer you additional information, I do not advise even saying, well, tell me more about that, because then you're back leading the questions once you say, tell me more.
That's extremely helpful. Everything you've said is extremely helpful. One point we haven't talked on, and this will have to be our final question because of time limits. We certainly advise interviewees how to dress.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us what your advice is to interviewers about how to dress for the interview.
Yeah, if you're looking at professional, salaried, leadership type roles, I think you should always dress the part. I think your office should be neat. You should be well groomed because you are the face of the company in which you represent. So you want that candidate to see the person that's conducting the interview to represent the culture and who that company presents himself to be to the general public. You want your office to be neat because I've been in a lot of hiring manager offices that I thought, ooh, this person definitely has some time management issues, and I would suspect they miss a lot of deadlines because of the unorganization of their office. Now, be wary of the person that has nothing on their desk because they're going to be the master delegator and you might be the new delegatee. So there's a balance in there. If you're in a position, you're going to have work out on your desk. You should have work out on your desk, but you want to present a clean, neat environment because that's probably what you're going to expect of that individual is that they're going to have a clean and neat desk. So I think it's just as important for the interviewer to be appropriately dressed, to look the part, to play the role. And then, as I mentioned earlier, after that first interview, then you can begin to discuss the more casual aspects of a company's dress code.
Stacey, all of this has been extremely helpful coming from a top professional who has worked for more than 2 decades from both sides of the interviewing desk. I know people want to contact you, so please share your contact information with us.
Yeah, I would love to do that. And if we have just 30 seconds left after that, I would like to add one more thing if you can make that time. If not, we definitely
can
understand.
Do that, yes.
Spherion Staffing, we're located at Sherwood Park Drive and Anoda. We're on the web at spherion.com. I encourage anyone to go out there that is looking to hire or looking for an opportunity to find a new career out there, to go to our website. There's tools for both. And again, that's spherion.com. And if you just want to give us an old-fashioned phone call, 770-531-7900.
Okay, thank you for that. I know people will want to reach out to you. And since you've shared your contact information, I'm happy to share mine. The Biz Communication Guy, so logically, it's Biz, B-I-Z, my website, bizcommunicationguy.com. Invite you to visit there, sign up for my online newsletter, check my services for leaders and for corporations. Stacey, what closing comments might you have for us?
You mentioned ghosting. Let me tell you how an individual handled what could be construed as ghosting very, very well. Just last week in our office, we had this gentleman in. We'd done the basic interview. He was on our applicant system in office, filling out paperwork. He was real excited about an opportunity we were going to present to him. And he got a cell phone text. And it was someone that had interviewed him 2 weeks ago. They offered him the position via text. He wanted to accept it. So instead of continuing on, he asked to see the recruiter. He explained what had happened. He explained what a great opportunity it was. And we told him we understood. And if something didn't work out, he was more than welcome to come back to us and we would pick up where we left off. And on top of that, he's going to work for a prospect that we would like to do business with, and we're hoping through our relationship of how we handled his situation, he'll help make that introduction in the near future to it for us. So that's a situation where it was handled very professionally.
And it worked out well for both of you.
It did, and those things come up, and I think hiring managers are accustomed to that. It's just the traditional ghosting is where someone disappears off the face of the earth and there's no contact. Bill, what's going to happen when that person needs to come back to that hiring manager down the road? I mean, we put notes in our computer system of what happened. We can look 3, 4, 5 years ago and see what someone said or did in our office. So we have long memories.
In some cases, you don't need the notes. You would remember. You would remember.
Bill, thank you for what you do for our community. Thank you for all of the training and all the work you've done for so many people. I've followed you for years. You know I'm a fan of yours.
Oh, what a warm compliment. Thank you so much, Stacey. I appreciate our professional affiliation and our friendship, and I definitely appreciate your being such an informative guest today, which I knew you would be. Thank you. And thanks to all of you who joined us for the Biz Communication Show. Be with us again next week when again we will bring information from experts that will help you boost your productivity and your profits. I'm your host, Bill Lampton.